Hey y'all, it's Melissa of the blog Melly Sews and designer of Blank Slate Patterns. Today we're going to be sewing these really cute pajama shorts out of a vintage sheet. Now while I used a vintage sheet because I like the print, you could actually use any kind of fabric you want. These have an elastic waistband and they have this detail on the side with the scalloped side vent and a lace trim that's optional. I'll be showing you how to do all of this today on the video. So let's get started with materials. You're going to need elastic. You're going to need your shorts pieces cut out of the pattern, and you can get the pattern if you can see the links in the video. There's a link up here. If you can't see it, it's also down in the description. So you'll go to the blog post with links to print your pattern and to cut out your shorts legs. You'll also need lace if you choose to do the lace trim. So let me give you a second to go ahead and get all of those things together, get your shorts cut out, and then come back to the video and we'll start sewing. Okay, we're going to do a couple of things before we start sewing to make it easier later when we do so. So the first thing I've done is I've sewn a basting stitch 1/2 inch away from the raw edge all along the lower edge of my pattern piece. And what this is going to do is this is going to allow me to make a very narrow hem here. The first thing we want to do is here on the scallop, where that piece is, you want to clip all the way up to the point of your stitching. Don't cut through the stitching line though. And then I'll switch to this other piece here so you can see how I've created this hem. The first thing you're going to do with the hem is you're going to press the fabric right along that basting line that you made. And you'll notice when you get to the curve of the scallop here that it is going to pucker slightly. So that's okay. The wrinkles on this side are okay because, and they're going to be caused because this curve is going to be wider than the curve once you press it. On the front side though, you can see this does look like a smooth scallop, and that's the important part. You want the front side to look smooth. So after you've pressed this in on the basting line once, you'll take the edge, the raw edge, and press it in towards your basting line. That'll help you create a really narrow hem. And what this looks like when it's completed is what I've got done here on the other side. So I went ahead and I pressed once, and then I folded this edge in to create that narrow hem with the basting stitching still right along the hemline. And you can see around the curve here that the puckers still exist, and that's okay. Up here at the point of the fabric, since that's cut on the bias, that's not going to fray as much, and it'll also get hemmed under the lace trim that we're going to be putting on this scallop. I also went ahead and I pre-pressed the top of the shorts here, and that'll help me later with the elastic casing. So what I did was I went ahead and I pressed 1/4 inch down on the raw edge, and then I pressed again 1 1/4 inches down to create the waistband casing here. And after I sew this, that'll just make it much easier for me to press that waistband casing and go ahead and stitch the casing. So our first step here that we want to do is we want to take the full shorts piece and we want to place it right sides together with the other shorts piece. So got my 2 shorts pieces and I'm going to place them right sides together, and then I want to sew the 2 rise seams. So I'm going to be sewing the front rise seam here with this waistband edge unfolded. I want to go ahead and stitch that, and then I will be sewing the back rise again with the waistband seam unfolded, and I will stitch this back rise curve. Let me go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you what this looks like when it's finished. All right, I've gone ahead and I've sewn the back rise, and I have sewn the front rise of my shorts. I finished this seam with my serger. If you don't have a serger, some other options to finish that seam would be to use pinking shears or to use a faux overlock stitch. And if you don't know how to do those things, I've got a link down here in the description to how to do seam allowances and, how to do seam finishes. And you can find that in the description, and it will help you with some of these choices and how to do this if you don't have a serger. So now that I've got those two seams sewn, the next step is to fold my shorts this way. So I've got one rise seam right across on top of the other. And this is going to allow me to find the inseam of these shorts, which I want to stitch together now. So I'm going to start by pinning my seam allowances matching down here. And I want to make sure that one seam allowance goes in one direction and that the other seam allowance goes in the other direction when I pin this. The reason for that is when I line this seam allowance up with the way that I've got the inseam pressed, this is going to go to the right. If I flip these shorts over where I had pressed the seam allowance the other direction and I line it up, I'm still got my seam allowance going to the right. That's going to be important because when I take my elastic casing through and I thread it through, this way I'm not going to end up running into a seam allowance and getting the elastic stuck behind that seam allowance. So I want them all running in that same direction. Because we've put them in opposite directions here at the inseam, this also is going to reduce some bulk on that seam. If they were all on one side or the other, that would make it rather bulky. So once I've got the center pinned, I'm just going to go ahead and match my fabric to the ends and pin, and do the same for the other side. You can use as many or as few pins as you need to do this, and then you're just going to stitch across the inseam in one seam. Let me go ahead and do that, and then I'll meet you back at the camera. I've gone ahead and sewn this inseam, and I finished this also with my serger. The steps left now on the shorts are to do the hems and to do the waist casing. So we're going to start with the waist casing. And this is where the fact that I pre-pressed this is actually going to come in handy. I'm going to trim off some of these extra serger threads. But then what I want to do is press that seam allowance over to the side, and then I'm going to press in my casing. If you did not pre-press with your iron earlier, you can go ahead and do that now. So I'm just going to pin this casing in place, and I'm going to continue all the way around to pin my casing flat. Because this fabric holds the creases pretty well, and because I pre-pressed it, I'm not actually going to need that many pins to be able to create this waist casing. So just going ahead and pinning these things. And then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go ahead and stitch right along this edge, but I will leave an opening about 1.5 inches to thread my elastic through when I'm done stitching. Let me go ahead and show you what this looks like when you get to that step. So I've stitched my waist casing all the way around the shorts, and I've left a gap. You can see it right here. It's about 1.5 inches wide. Now I'm going to be inserting the elastic. So this elastic is cut to the same length as the measurement on my body where I want these shorts to sit. So it's a little more than my waist length because I want these to sit a little bit lower. So I just took the measurement from where I want my pants to sit and I cut the elastic that length. I'm going to go ahead and insert a safety pin through the end of the elastic, and that just helps give me something to pull on. And then I want to make sure that I go into the casing the same direction as the seam allowances were pressed. So I'm just going to insert my elastic into that casing and then use the safety pin to help pull the elastic all the way around. Make sure that when you come back around that you don't twist the elastic and that you don't let the other end of the elastic get sucked into the casing, because then you have to pull it back out. And in fact, you grab a pencil here. I'm going to mark an X, and I know now that this side up needs to be up when I come back around, and that's how I'll make sure that this is not twisted. So once I have made it back around to where I started, and I've got that safety pin coming back out of the gap, I want to pull the rest of the elastic through. And back out the gap. And then I'm going to remove the safety pin. And we're going to overlap these two pieces of elastic. And I'm going to stitch in a square around those. So let me do that real quick. I'm just using a regular straight stitch on my machine, and pull out enough elastic so that you can get it to lay flat on your machine. So once that elastic is sewn into a square, you want to go ahead and pull the rest of that into the waist casing. And then if you just kind of stretch the waist out a few times, that'll help get the elastic evenly distributed. You do want to hold this little gap flat and then go ahead and finish stitching that casing closed. And I overlap the stitches a little bit from where I stopped and to where I started so that that stitching is nice and secure. Okay, so I've closed the opening, and I want to trim off all the extra threads there. And then again, just give my shorts a couple of pulls, and you can see I've got this nice elastic waist casing now. The final thing to finish these shorts is going to be to do the hemline. So what we want to do for the hem is we've already pressed that seam down toward, or sorry, the raw edge towards the basting. And I just want to make sure that at the inseam where I sewed them together, that I go ahead and add a pin. Your pressing line may or may not match up exactly there, and if it doesn't, that's okay. You just kind of split the difference and then get that pinned in place. So I've got this all pinned together, and what I want to do next is I'm going to actually be pinning the lace in, and then I'll sew the hem and the lace together all in one step. So I'm going to be turning these right side out, and I'm going to start the lace at the inseam. And I'm just going to pin the lace so that it just peeks out there under the edge of the fabric. I'm going to be using a lot of pins for this part. And then I'll just continue around the shorts, pinning that lace flat in and catching the hem that I pressed at the same time. I'll go ahead and finish this off camera because it's going to take me a little while to pin all of this, and then we'll show you what it looks like. So I've got the lace pinned in place here, and I want to show you a couple things that are important. First of all, in the scalloped edge here, what you're going to do is you're going to pin, and then you will fold the lace until you can start pinning down the other scallop, and then you'll just pin that excess into place. It'll get sewn right as you sew the rest of the hem. And then at the end here, you want to, if you can, get the scallops to match up and just overlap them one scallop so that when they're stitched in place, it looks like one continuous piece of lace. You'll notice I switched to pinning on the back side or the wrong side of the fabric. That just made it a little easier. So once you stitch this lace in place, here's what the inseam is going to look like. You can see I overlapped these two scallops. This lace isn't going to fray, so I don't need to worry about finishing that edge. And then I stitched the lace in place all along that hem edge. Here is what it looks like at the scallop. I've just got that extra lace and it was stitched into place around there. If I really wanted to make sure that it kept folded, I could also stitch this edge. And I might hand stitch that just to tack it down. And then on the outside, here's what it looks like. We've got the lace peeking out all along the hem of the shorts. So as soon as I finish the other leg on these shorts, then I'll be done.